Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. I am Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This is episode number 54 of the LitRPG Podcast. And this week I have 10, that's right, count them, 10 whole new reviews for you this week. And I think that's actually a new record for the podcast. I'm sure somebody will check it and tell me I'm wrong, but as far as I know, I don't think I've ever reviewed that many novels in 1 week. And the novels that I will be reviewing this week are, again, from the last Synaptic, a LitRPG Adventure, Epoch of Our Beneficence, Volume 1. That's one title. After that, it'll be The Forgotten Throne, Part 1. And then it will be They Fight Three Giants, a Caverns and Creature short story. After that, it'll be Negative Man. Then after that, it'll be Area of Effect, the fifth book in the Crucible short series. After that, it'll be The Eternal Dragonborn. This is actually book 2 in the world of Gaim. A game, you know. After that, it'll be Spellbinder, The Shadow Legacy, Volume 1. And then after that, it'll be the second book in the Dark Herbalist series called Stay on the Wing. And then after that will be Stone Raiders Return, which is book 6 in the Emerilia series. And last but certainly not least, it is going to be Eden's Gate, The Sparrow, which is the second book in the Eden's Gate series. So there you go, folks. Now, I was actually going to review an additional novel this week called Level 0, LitRPG Adventure, the NextWorld Series Book 1. And then I was reading, I'm like, hey, I've read this before. And it turns out I've read it. I've reviewed it already. It's on the recommendation list of the podcast. You want to look through our, LitRPG database. I just didn't recognize it because they had a new cover and it showed up on the most recent list on Amazon, which means they put out a new edition. So it's just showing up higher, more recently than it actually was originally written. So there you go. Now on to LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we're to begin with Feyroll. The translation team that is translating that book has revealed this week that the release dates for books 3 and 4 are as follows. For Feyroll book 3, it'll be July the 1st, not that far. For book 4, it'll be August the 15th, 2017. Now, remember that this series has already been completed in Russia for a very long time. So all they're doing is translating it and posting it in English. So that's why they can do these very quick releases. Okay, also in LitRPG news, Blaze Corvin has ended his contest to get who he's collaborating with on a special project, and the author he's working with turns out to be William D. Arand, author of Supercells and Superheroes and also the Other Life series. The two will be working on a completely original story with a unique setting, unique characters, so they're not like pulling, combining characters from their respective stories. The exact details on the project are still being kept under wraps, but Blaze says that it should be ready within the next 6 months. So I'm looking forward to seeing whatever they're doing. Okay. Also, Travis Bagwell, author of the Awaken Online series. His hit novel, Awaken Online Catharsis, which is the first book in that series, has just passed 3,000 ratings on Audible. That is, sort of makes me jealous, but I'm also very proud of my friend. To celebrate that huge accomplishment, he's giving away 10 audiobooks for free for both Awaken Online 1 and 2. You can go sign up. He has a special raffle copter. I'm not sure what that is. I'm assuming it's just a way to organize the contest. We'll link in the show notes for you folks if you want to enter that contest. But for me personally, I looked at my own Audible reviews. I'm something like 450. So I'm oh, I thought that was good. But if you haven't listened to Awaken Adventures on Terra, or if you have and you haven't read it, go do that as well. That'll help me out. And maybe I can catch up to Travis Bagwell at some point. Okay, next LitRPG news is Dakota Grout, another friend of the podcast, author of the Divine Legend series. He actually started his own Patreon page. Finally, I think I mentioned to him a few times before that he should. He has a ton of great rewards available if you're a supporter, if you like his stuff, including shoutouts on his pages, ebooks once they're ready for future stuff, signed physical copies of the novel, early access drafts of the story, free coffee mugs, well not free, but coffee mugs at a certain supporter level. And now this is the biggest reward. If you're willing to be $1,000 a month supporter, he'll even fly out to you and take you out to dinner in addition to giving you all the other, tiers of rewards. So if you want to have dinner with Dakota Crowd, $1,000 is not a bad price. We all have our price, and that's what it is for a nice dinner. Now, what you guys do after dinner is totally up to you. Additionally, Dakota also did a very funny and special reading of his novel. It's super funny and hilarious to watch. It's just kind of a fun thing he did. You go watch the video. It's on his Facebook page for the Divine Dungeon series. We also have a link in the show notes for that video directly if you just want to click on that and watch it. Funny. Okay, last we have a LitRPG community member, Ihab Lachir, has posted a fan reading of The Arcane Emperor on his YouTube page. Now, The Arcane Emperor is a road story, really well received, good reviews. I enjoyed it. I give it a nice review. And the only way he can enjoy LitRPG is by using either a speech-to-text program, or if it's read out loud, either in audiobook form or someone reads it to him. So he actually got permission for the project from the author of The Arcane Emperor, and it is out on chapter 1 of The Arcane Emperor is available on his YouTube page. So go check it out. I actually took a listen to it. Well, nicely done, I have to say. So go check it out. There you go. There are no new LitRPG audiobooks officially from Audible, so your best shot is going to be that fan one from Ihab. Now, a few other novels came out this week. Haven't had a chance to review them, but hopefully able to catch up next week. We have Viridian's Gate Online, The Jade Lord, which is the third book in that series that is out now. Plague in the Greenwood, which is set in the Greenwood series. I'm not really sure where this comes in there, because there was a missing one in there in that series for a little while, so this might be the filler. And then lastly, Reboot, an epic lit RPG, Afterlife Online, Book 1, which is doing really well on Amazon sale, so I'm hoping that it's going to be good. Now, in upcoming LitRPG, this is where we just read off the stories that are coming up in the next few weeks. On June the 15th, we have Restoration, The Rise of Resurgence, Book 2. On the 29th, it'll be The Quest, which is Dark Pollen, Book 2. On the July the 1st, we just talked about Faerul Book 3, also on the 1st, Hero of Not. On the 6th of July, The Curse to the Renown Castle, which is the Neuro Book 2. On the 12th of July, Codename Freedom Survival Week 1. 14th of July, it's going to be The First Planet, The Space Masters. On the 15th of July, it'll be The Kingdom Level 3, which is the third book in that series. On the 28th of July, it'll be Stratus Online Awakening. And then that's it for June and July. There are a few more things out in August, but you can look at those, the full long list of everything we know about in the future at LitRPGPodcast.com, on our recommendation page or on our Facebook page. They're all there as a long list if you want to check out things that far in advance. But that's it for the LitRPG news. On to new releases and reviews. And in new releases and reviews, the first novel that we'll be reviewing is, again, from the last Synaptic, a LitRPG Adventure, Epoch of Our Beneficence. That's the title. It is written by Adeline Green. The cover art looks super cerebral. I know, my puns. Okay, it is 166 pages. It is $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description of the novel. In this wry, paranoid vision of the future, prison inmates are unknowingly forced to participate in a global computer simulation. Michael Jackson is the manager of a film processing lab inside a grocery store. On the other side of town, Michael Jackson is the manager of a film processing lab inside of a pharmacy. Neither Michael Jackson knows the other exists. Neither Michael Jackson knows that there are players in a computer simulation controlled by an omnipresent corporation and the federal government. After a third Michael Jackson enters the simulation, reality begins twisting from the inside out, and reality itself loses shape. Again, from the last synopsis, is a mind-warping science fiction tale in which the reader is left constantly guessing what is real, who is playing the game, and the nature of free will. Now, this is easy review. This is not LitRPG. Either the author does not really understand what LitRPG is, or they think it is just a virtual reality fiction, anything to do with like computer simulation, any kind of, small game stuff. But that's not really, this is basically just speculative fiction about the nature of reality and kind of what if the world were a simulation kind of story, which is fine. And it's not badly written. I read the thing. It is not LitRPG though. So quick review, score 4 out of 10. So sorry. Next one, The Forgotten Throne Part 1, LitRPG serial, written by Elliot Burns. This is 86 pages. It is 99 cents. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. So it's a short story, but also has a short story price. So it's appropriately priced. Now, this is my description of the story. Jack's uncle disappeared for 40 years and then reappeared. When he reappeared, he was in a vegetative state. Before he died, he left a weird message that Jack just didn't understand. And because Jack is so distracted by this mystery, he dies in an accident and is teleported to a fantasy world. Now Jack finds himself the lord of a castle with a game-like interface. And to be honest, that summary description is about 90% of this novel, 90% of the short story, I should say. And which means that game interface thing comes at the very, very end, and that's what happens in this particular story. Approximately 75% of the story reads like Portal Fantasy and Real World story. There's no hints at game mechanics, LitRPG stuff at all. It's not really to the last 10% of the story that you even get anything LitRPG-ish. And even then, it's like a brief explanation of mechanics. So you see a character sheet, which isn't described or explained, and then the main character is teleported away and the novel just ends. And that's a little annoying. Like I said, there's enough LitRPG that it is. There's enough game mechanics that are in that I guess technically qualifies, but I wouldn't say it's good LitRPG because it's such a small percentage of the actual story. Now I understand this is a serial story, which means that this first episode has to set everything up. And then hopefully in episode 2, we're going to get full on LitRPG game mechanics storyline, and that's what I'm hoping for. I don't know that it's actually going to be the case. It's just that in this particular episode, this first one, it didn't really do it for me, and that's mostly because there are sections that are set in this fantasy world, but it's presented as a fantasy world. It's not presented as a LitRPG game world, and so that really didn't annoy me. And it didn't really satisfy that LitRPG craving. So, although I hope this improves, and I hope it has potential, because I think it does, it just wasn't going to do it for me. So it gets a score of 4 out of 10. Okay, on to our next review. They Fight Three Giants, Caverns and Creatures short story written by Robert Bevan. This is 39 pages long. It is $2.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, Dave, Cooper, and Tim are tricked through a magical portal and kidnapped by a giant who wants them to help his sons become men. Hilarious misunderstandings, innuendos, and bathroom humor follow. That's my description of the story. Overall, this is a really funny read. It's a short story from the Caverns and Creatures collection. However, for the page count, it's just not worth the almost $3 price. Like that puts it at about almost 10 cents per page, which is just a little bit too much for me. Now, I'd recommend reading this once it actually becomes a part of the next Caverns and Creatures short story collection. But I do like the fact that the author puts these short stories out as soon as they're ready and available and lets the readers decide if they want to pay that price tag. If you're a huge fan of the series and you just need your fix between the next full-on novel, this is great for you and you're willing to pay it, go do it. The author gives you that choice. But for me personally, as far as like a value proposition, the author normally does take like the latest selection of short stories, puts them out as a collection, and you save quite a bit of money on that. So that's what I recommend doing for you if you're interested in this. But for me, I really liked it. It gets a score of a 7 out of 10. Okay, on to our next one. Negative Man, Book 1, LitRPG. Written by Outspan Foster. Okay, it is $2. I'm sorry, it is 220 pages, $2.99. It is available in Kindle Unlimited. I will read the author's description of the story. David Pentacross has achieved his lifelong dream of being a level 100 adventurer on his home world, Eternity Ring, a massive ring world in which strength and a person's level dictate how society functions. But David is old. When he loses everything he holds dear, David discovers an odd ring with an ancient dungeon. The moment he puts it on, he loses a level. In exchange for returned youth, the ring saps his powers and makes him lose a level every day until he is killed or becomes a level 1 again. In a world where a person's level means everything, David is doomed to become weaker, and he must use his experience to survive the harsh world of Eternity Ring. Okay, actually a really interesting premise, I have to say. Now, just a quick warning, there are very regular spelling and grammar errors in the story. The author is really open about this and transparent. He says in the part of the description that this is full of spelling and grammar errors because he couldn't afford to hire an editor. But he's using the money from, obviously, the proceeds of selling this story to improve the story and the other things that he's planning to publish. And while I was reading this, I could tell that this was originally a serial on the railroad, but again, the author does tell the audience. In the first 17% of the story, there's not much world building. The world itself feels kind of empty. You don't really know about it. You're told about a few characters. The main character, of course, he's the commander of a mercenary, or a group of soldiers. And he's like the most amazing commander ever. He's an inspiration to the community, but you don't know about the larger world in that first like 17, 20% of the novel. And it's really just a basic setup of getting the main character that rare artifact, that ring that propels the rest of the story. Now, again, the rest of the story goes on to feel a lot like a collection of short stories, because each one of these chapters usually tells like some backstory of the character, or some of the things that he did with his old soldier friends, which creates some depth to him and some of the world, but it's all spaced out every single chapter. There's a lot of fighting in here. So if you're into action and interesting uses of skill mechanics and game mechanics and abilities, this is going to satisfy that itch. But you can tell that there was really no well thought out novel plot. It's just like every single week I'm writing a story, and I hope it's entertaining, or it's a writing exercise. But if looking at the novel as a whole, you can tell there's no purposeful plot to the entire thing. Like, some interesting things happen every single chapter. I'm not saying it doesn't. It's just that as a novel, you can tell there's not that, that plot arch. The beginning of the story goes from like a vague description of main character Davin as a commanding linear troop, to him being teleported to a forest trying to survive, to him in a city sentenced to death and fighting in a pit for his life in a series of increasingly difficult fights for the amusement of others. Again, the action is nice. The RPG elements, skills, ability, and stats, they're well thought out, if occasionally used as a magic wand. Like he tells us about a new ability they just didn't describe earlier to get him out of a fix. That's occasional. However, aside from the interesting stories about the main character, again, there's no overall plot when telling the reader where this story is kind of going. And it just also ends really abruptly. Like, the story goes on, and it cuts off, like almost in the middle of a sentence, practically. And that happens on the railroad all the time. I'm not sure if there's like another section of the story that's planned to be released at some point in the future, but for me, it left a slightly unsatisfying taste in my mouth. And overall, it's a fine story. It's just not really good or great. It's just kind of okay for me. But if you're a fan of the series on the road, I really do encourage you to go pick this up. Give the author some money for his hard work. But for me, it gets a score of a 5 out of 10. Okay, on to Area of Effect, a LitRPG Adventure, the Crucible Shard Book 5, written by Skylar Grant. This is 192 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, Yvira and Liam have split into two forms, changing not only the past, but the present, by creating a new pantheon and making Liam king of the world. Okay, now Yvira is both a mortal and a new goddess on the side of the AI in Liam's world. Now he has to seek the help of the Queen Ashera, a being from another dimension, and Cobalt's mother. Liam's only hope to get this powerful being on his side: fall in love with her. That kind of seems to be a theme. Will Liam end up saving the Earth or destroying it? And that's my synopsis of the story. Okay, there's a lot of weird stuff that happens in this novel, like dimensional hopping, split beings, dissected gods, new gods, stuff for AI, ninja dinosaurs, and so much more. Not to mention there are twists in the narrative almost every other chapter. So there's a lot of stuff happening here. So this is definitely not the first book in the series that you want to read. You want to go to the beginning if you're interested in this thing at all. And it gets increasingly interesting as the series progresses, of course. Now, despite all that stuff that happens, all those weird kind of things, the core of the story is really about Liam deciding who he wants to be and what he wants for the future. This is kind of his character progression story, because despite all those things that happen, it's really about him finally making a decision about who he's going to be. And that's the core of the story. And by the end of the story, of course, he's made some personal growth in that respect, and he's figured out a little more who he wants to be, which is good. Overall, this is a good read if you're a fan of the series. If you're not, or if you haven't read the earlier parts, you're probably not going to like this, because in my opinion, the series kind of jumped the shark in book 4. And in book 4 and 5, it's been increasingly weird and odd. And I mean, it's not a bad thing necessarily. It creates some interesting story opportunities. But for readers coming into the series, this is not where you want to start at all. So if you like the series, you're going to like this one as well. However, the one thing I really liked about this story, I have to say, ninja dinosaurs. You can't go wrong with ninja dinosaurs. That's such a unique and interesting even though it's like a very tiny part of the story. Monster for the heroes to fight. I'm like, oh, that's I wouldn't have thought of that. Ninja dinosaurs. So there you go. For me, it gets a score of a 6 out of 10. Okay, on to our next story. The Eternal Dragonborn, a LitRPG Saga, World of Gaim, Book 2. Written by Daya Ambajangani. Look, I'm really sorry about that, man. Your name will appear on the cover in the actual video, so there you go, folks. Okay, it is 379 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, this is my description of the story. Our hero, Zoran Diablo, now level 152, struggles to travel through the world as the Phantom Lord. After rescuing a village and becoming its master, Zoran rescues a kobold and finds that everyone and their mother seems to be trying to kidnap him for some reason. Will Zoran figure out what's caused the Dark Alliance, the Luminous Alliance, and the Light Alliance to attack his village, and why everyone keeps trying to kidnap his kobold friend? There you go. Okay, this is a very action-filled story. Book 1 in this series didn't get a great review for me. It got a 5 out of 10. And that's mostly because there was a lot of issues with story consistency, a lot of convenient story points that just gave the main character too much power. The game rule mechanics didn't really get followed a lot. And in this case, a lot of that has been addressed. Again, ton of action. It starts off with fighting and it continues all the way through the novel, which I'm a big fan of. And I'm really happy to see that there's a lot more consistency in the game mechanics in book 2 of the series. And any limitations imposed by powers and abilities of the main character, they're absolutely follow through, despite negative consequences to the main character himself, like running out of time, having a long recharge time for some powers. He's still OP. He's very overpowered, so level 521. But at least it's more consistent in this particular novel version of, and of course, other characters appear as powerful, so it still gives them a challenge. Now, additionally in the story, Zoran, the main character, gets a village, Icarus, and there is a little bit of kingdom building or town building mechanics in here. But there's not a lot. And I would have loved to have actually seen that game mechanic, that new game mechanic, explored a little bit more in detail and mean more into the story. In the end, that town really just ends up being a place where events happen in the story and not a community that the main character is building up. That may change in future stories, of course, but for now it's just a place, not as much as a community that's being built, which is unfortunate because I think it's a missed story opportunity. Again, the biggest flaw in this particular novel is the same as it was in the first one. There's a lot of convenience that gets the main character out of trouble. It's not nearly as bad as it was in book 1. In this novel, Zoran finds himself fighting against overwhelming odds. Well, he's saved by another character, Freya. When he goes up against an enemy that's more powerful than him, well, he discovers a new power. He gets a gigantic level boost that conveniently allows him to defeat the bad guy. How the bad guys keep finding the kobold that they keep kidnapping, even though he's moved around? Well, the spirit of the Dark Lord tells him where he is, or they just happen to have a magic artifact. And again, that happens a lot in the story. Again, not as much as the first one, which is why this one gets a better review, but it's still a recurring issue. So be aware of that. Again, overall, it's a very action-oriented story, which I like. Again, starts off fighting and series of fights all the way through. And now if you can ignore the many these issues with the story where it's very convenient that somebody just saves them or a new power is discovered that helps them out, then you're going to enjoy the story of an overpowered hero, which is what this is. If you can't, you're probably not going to like this. But for me, it was enjoyable by the ending. Even though, again, I have issues with it, it was still a pretty good read. It gets a score of a 7 out of 10 for me. Okay, on to Spellbinder, The Shadow Legacy, written by Aidan Avery. Okay, this is 141 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, one of the weirdest things about the story is that it starts out with the date of starting out in 2011, which means it actually starts in the past. So I thought that was an interesting twist. I'm not sure if that was intentional, I should say, or if it's just a typo. Either way, my description of the story. This is a sucked into a game story where Rex is told he's really from a game dimension. The game master tells him that this dimension works like a tabletop RPG, with dice rolls and everything. As he plays, he'll get to decide his own powers and eventually come across another player who will seek to destroy him. So that's kind of my story summary. Okay, this is actually a 2-narrative story, and the story switches between them two. The first is for Rex, who his game character is called Thulin. He's told he's should be playing the evil side of the game, but he's not technically tied to that storyline. He has a little bit of free will. And now he has the benefit of progressing slower, but he has a lot more flexibility in what he can do. He actually creates his own powers and magic spells. So he has the benefit. Now, the other side of this narrative is Pimberly, which is the other player mentioned before. She's a young woman who starts up playing on the good side of the storyline. Now, she actually progresses in power a lot more quickly. She gets more specialized powers as a rogue class, rogue enchanter. And she has a lot more support as far as her training goes. She actually goes to a tower and she trains as a rogue, and she's, prophesized to be some kind of chosen one or something. And those are basically the two narratives that's going to switch through between in the story. Now, at times, this story feels like it's very earnestly trying to be portal fiction. Like, it's just regular fantasy, some RPG mechanics, and it's fine. But on a very regular basis, that immersion of the story is broken when both players and NPCs start to do out-of-character speech. And what I mean by that is that, in general, you have your main characters, which might be from our world, and they speak like regular people like us. But the rest of the fantasy creatures in that world are unaware that there's another dimension. And so they're just living their lives. They don't recognize a lot of this, gamer slang we use. But in this particular instance, it's like there's a switch on these NPCs. And they will go from that kind of behavior of like, I'm not aware that this is a game, or that you're a player, and what game terms you're using, and they're just doing the storyline, to being completely self-aware and self-referential to all this game stuff. And it's like, I want them to choose one or the other. If you want to be full-blown, like everybody's aware this is a game, fine, do it that way. Or if you want to be like, only these main characters are aware of it and everybody else this is just a fantasy world to them, do it that way. But mixing the two just kind of breaks the immersion for either one. And it's very confusing, and it kind of breaks me the story every time this thing happens. And it happens a lot during the story, which is what my biggest concern and flaw in the story is, in my opinion. Like I said, this has been done before, where like there's that fourth wall breakage. You see it in NPC, which is a LitRPG story, and in Critical Failure series, it happens all the time there. But in those particular instances, it's rare, and there's very clear distinction as to when it's okay to do. In the case of NPCs, that out of character speak is done in our world, like the perspective of the story shifts to the real world, and you see players talking across a tabletop game in out of character speak, which is fine. Now, in Critical Failure, it happens when the game master will actually possess one of the characters, one of the NPCs, and speak for a little while out of character with the players, with the main characters. And in those instances, I think it's done a lot better. And this one, it's just, I don't think it's done well. But that's me. And it just kind of messes up the storyline for me. Also, the game mechanics in the story aren't really well defined or fleshed out. There's a character sheets and stats, but there's no really tells us what they mean in this world. There are spells and item descriptions, which is fine, and they're well described. But there's also a lot of level skipping, which kind of tells me that those level progressions don't really mean much in this story. Like, for example, the characters from level 1 to 3 to 9, without much explanation as to how they gained that much experience points or what they did to get there. Which, again, it's just a symptom of that. The game mechanics and story aren't as important as I think they should be for a LitRPG story. But again, that's more of a personal opinion. It is LitRPG by my loose definition of it. Again, this is not a bad read. Technically, good writing. But it wasn't super interesting. It's a fine attempt at infusing a LitRPG story with tabletop feel. However, the story feels like the type of tabletop game where the game master is heavy-handedly trying to force the players down a specific story path and not letting them have the free will of doing what they want. And that, to me, is not a fun game, which means that this is not a fun or immersive story, in my opinion. And I didn't have a really good time. It was a meh story for me. So it gets a score of about a 5 out of 10. There you go. Okay, on to Stay on the Wing, the Dark Herbalist, Book 2, written by Michael Atmanoff. It is 545 pages, $5.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, full disclosure, I received an advance copy of the novel for my review, but I purchased it once it became available. Okay, this is my story synopsis. After losing the warg shapeshifters, Timothy / Arma posts videos of himself getting his rare flying mount, not realizing the can of worms he's unleashing. All manner of players start to complain that a noob like Arma got such a rare mount, and they start to call for a boycott on the game. To pacify the online mob, the game company arranges for a hunt of Arma in which an item may drop, allowing the killer a chance to gain control of the rare flying mount. However, if Arma can stay alive and keep the mount until the hunt is done, then he'll get a permanent job at the company, and he can sell the mount for millions of credits. Let the great hunt begin. Okay, that's my synopsis. Overall, this is a good read. I mean, I really like this series, and if you're a fan of the first book, you're going to like this one just as much. The Great Hunt is a really nice mechanic that forces Arma to explore the larger world, including some high seas adventures, which is surprisingly well done for me. I'm not a big fan of pirates and sea stuff, but in this case, it was really nice. The various changes of scenery really add some nice variety to the story. Now, the novel introduces some really unique ways of tracking Arma down, like the players go out of their way to find him, and part of that finding him is like using unique way in addition to like game mechanics, like things like tracking spells. There's also a very unique use of the mail system in this story to try to find the main character and his mount and his group, of course. And I thought that was really cool. Also, I liked how Arma, Timothy, just doesn't accept the hunt, but also makes best use of it for his own benefit in the story. And like, he's not the kind of guy who just takes what's given to him. He uses it to his own advantage, and he twists it until it benefits him as well. And I like that about the character. One of the few complaints I have with the story is the in real life twist with Jane, who's a very interesting character in the story. I thought she had great potential as a character, and it was built up as the secretary who secretly controls everything in the background in for the game company. But the story has like a really dumb, in my opinion, twist ending for her, and I just thought it was a waste of a really good character. I won't spoil it, but for me, again, kind of a waste. Still, a really good story. I had a good time reading it. It's a score of 7 out of 10. Okay, on to Stone Raiders Return, Book 6 in the Emerilia series. This is a massive 333 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, full disclosure, I also got an advanced copy of this one, but again, I purchased it once it became available. Now, my synopsis. After the Battle of Devil's Crater, the Stone Raiders Guild continues to make connections with new allies and build up their guild and people. However, all their plans for advancement have made them some new enemies. Lord Esmael's trade monopoly was hurt when the Stone Raiders built a new teleport pad near his. Not only does this ambitious lord want to overthrow his king, he's also planning on taking revenge on the Stone Raiders on his way to the throne. So there you go. Okay, the first 20% of this novel is almost entirely updates about the various characters in the story. There's a lot of characters here. So much so that I think the author has like a glossary at either at the end of the book or on a separate webpage we have links to, where he lists all the many characters there. So it really does take 20% of this novel just to give you updates on what everybody's doing. Now at the 40% mark of this novel, it shifts into about 2 months worth of preparation and training. Now this includes guild stuff. Everybody gets training. Dave learns some new skills. He gets loads of stats. He crafts some pretty cool things. The Stone Raiders Guild builds a hub that they plan to make the center of Emerilia. So there's a lot of construction stuff. They name it Terra. So I'm thinking like, oh, adventures on Terra. I'm like, oh, either that's a good nod or it's just a coincidence. Either way, I'm like, hey, that's cool. There's also a lot of personal development in the story for these individual characters. Some of them which made me go, ah, that's adorable, which you'll see if you read this, which you read the novel, which you should. Now at the 60% mark is when that other plot line starts to come into play. Lord Esmael goes and he makes his bid for power. He goes to overthrow the king and attacks the Stone Raiders Guild and their little guild outpost. And there's tons of fighting, lots of action, lots of adventure, really cool new mechanics, especially with Dave's crafting abilities and some of the things he develops. They're implemented here. And there's a lot of, guild on guild kind of fighting stuff. And if you're looking for this lord, which has kind of been teased out in the last couple of novels, getting his due, you will not be disappointed, folks. Overall, good story, good crafting, good kingdom building, and good action. Gets a score of 7 out of 10. Okay, last but certainly not least is Eden's Gate, The Sparrow, a LitRPG Adventure. This is book 2 in this series. It is 351 pages. It is $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Now again, this is my description of the story. Gunnar Long was once human. Now his body on Earth is dead and his mind is trapped in the full immersion VR game called Eden's Gate. He's with the fully sentient artificial intelligence non-binary characters in the game called A Reborn. Having accepted his fate as a full-time resident in this world, Gunnar has found a few friends and a place to build a home. Now, he's expanding his ambitions by forming a guild and working out plans to expand his new home into a place people will come to for trading and crafting. However, questions remain about his old friend Jax and his connections to the band of killers and thieves called the Sparrows. Okay, and I gotta say, this was probably my favorite book of the week. It was just such a joy to read after, and this is also the last book I read this week. Personally, I read 8 other novels, or actually 9 other novels, and some of them were kind of a challenge to get through personally. They were either just, I was overanalyzing them, or I had my, LitRPG goggles on, just trying to see if they were really LitRPG or if they were just fake, or how much of it is, and just taking tons of notes on those other stories. And this was just a joy to sit back and enjoy and relax to. It really was, for that reading alone, just like my favorite story of the week. This is not an epic story about saving the world. It's a story of an ambitious player, Gunnar, and his adventures in Eden's Gate. That's it. And because it was such a simple story, not simple as in bad, but simple as in straightforward, no complications. It's an adventure kind of, journey. I could just sit back and relax and just go on the journey with these guys and feel like I was hanging out with my friends and hearing about their latest adventures. And it was really nice. There's lots of great fighting in here. There's crafting. There's a little flirting with an elf princess. There's community building, and some follow-ups to the storylines of the last novel. All stuff that I really like. There's also an introduction to a new player character who may or may not end up being a bad guy. I don't know. He kind of has a skewed moral view, but we'll see how that develops in future stories. And there's a tiny bit of story from the real world, which is interesting. But again, it's a very small portion, which is a big improvement over the last novel. And because most of the story takes place in this game world, and it's just really straightforward adventuring, new weapons, monsters, things like that. It was just easy to enjoy and I really appreciated that about it. It was a really good read for me. The world building makes the characters feel real, and I want them to have good things happen to Gunnar and his friends. And again, for me, it was just relaxing with some friends that I haven't seen in months, and I can't wait to hang out with them again in the next novel. So for me, it was a good read, great read, I should say. It gets a score of 8 out of 10. So there you go, folks. That is it. Look at that. Not that long this time. That's it, everybody. Remember, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Patreon. And if you enjoyed the podcast, you want to support us in any other way, shape, or form, you can do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. But hey, one of the easiest ways of supporting the podcast is just go to our Facebook page. Go give us a like, and then we can see all the reviews we give you every week and get notifications of when the latest podcast is up and available for you. And you can go enjoy it and have nice conversations with other LitRPG people who are reading and looking at those reviews. So thanks a lot. But that's it, folks. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And until we can hang out again, remember, folks, to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye. Hey everybody, Ramon Mejia here from the LitRPG Podcast, just getting all set up for the show. So just gonna do my normal exercises, get my show notes all put up, all that good stuff. Okay. The wiggles. All the wiggles out. It's a much earlier time today. Last couple weeks just been recording at night, writing those reviews at the last minute after I read them this week. Much easier. I spread out all the work, and the result is a much happier, fresher, nicer Ramon. So there you go, folks. I hope you guys enjoy this. Okay, looks like I'm all ready to go. I'm all shook up. Oh, hey. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, show starts in 3, 2, 1.